Coming up on 5 Minute News. Black man executed by shot to the back of head by North Carolina police. Justice Department opens police probe after Breonna Taylor death. And carbon emissions are higher than countries are reporting. It's Tuesday, April 27. I'm Anthony Davis. A black man killed by deputies in North Carolina was shot in the back of the head and had his hands on his car steering wheel when they opened fire, attorneys for his family said on Monday after relatives viewed body camera footage. The account was the first description of the shooting of Andrew Brown Jr., who was killed by deputies serving drug-related search and arrest warrants. His death last Wednesday led to nightly protests and demands for justice in the town of Elizabeth City. Authorities have released few details, and the video has not been made public. Attorney Chantel Cherry Lassiter watched a 20-second portion of body camera video with Brown's family. Lassiter said Brown did not appear to be a threat to officers as he backed his vehicle out of his driveway and tried to drive away from deputies with guns drawn. There was no time in the 20 seconds that we saw where he was threatening the officers in any kind of way, she told reporters at a news conference. When asked whether Brown was shot in the back, attorney Harry Daniels said, "Yes, back of the head. My dad got executed just by trying to save his own life," said Brown's adult son, Khalil Farabi, who watched the video. Lassiter, who watched the video several times and took notes, said the shooting started as soon as the video began and that she lost count of the number of gunshots fired by law enforcement officers armed with rifles and handguns. She said she counted as many as 8 deputies in the video, some wearing tactical uniforms and some in plain clothes. They're shooting and saying, "Let me see your hands," at the same time, she said. She added, "Let's be clear. This was an execution." The Justice Department is opening a sweeping probe into policing in Louisville, Kentucky, over the March 2020 death of Breonna Taylor, who was shot to death by police during a raid at her home, Attorney General Merrick Garland announced yesterday. It's the second such probe into a law enforcement agency by the Biden administration in a week. Garland also announced an investigation into the tactics of the police in Minneapolis following the murder of George Floyd. The Attorney General has said there is not yet equal justice under the law and promised to bring a critical eye to racism and legal issues when he took the job. Few such investigations were opened during the Trump administration. The 26-year-old Taylor, an emergency medical technician who had been studying to become a nurse, was roused from her bed by police, who came through the door using a battering ram. A no-knock warrant was approved as part of a narcotics investigation. No drugs were found at her home. "I can't wait for the world to see Louisville Police Department for what it really is," Taylor's mother, Tamika Palmer, tweeted after the announcement. Scientists said on Monday they have detected a large gap equal to about what the United States emits annually between the amount of climate-warming emissions that countries report and the amount that independent models say reaches the atmosphere. The gap of around 5.5 billion tons of carbon dioxide per year arises not because any country is doing anything wrong. Rather, it is due to differences between scientific methods used in national inventories that countries report under the 2015 Paris Agreement on climate change and methods used by international models. The emissions gap, explained in a study published on Monday in the monthly journal Nature Climate Change, could mean some countries will have to adjust their emissions reductions. For instance, the country models done by the United States and other nations show more carbon-absorbing managed forest land than the independent models indicate. The study finds the national estimates, which allow more flexible definitions for those lands, show about 3 billion hectares more managed forest land around the world than the independent models. The risk is that some countries could claim managed forests are absorbing large amounts of emissions and do not do enough to cut emissions from cars, homes, and factories. As countries work to keep their commitments to cut emissions as part of the Paris Agreement to limit the global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, the discrepancy could become a larger issue. The Biden administration is urging countries to advance their goals on cutting emissions ahead of UN climate talks in Scotland in November. Under the Paris Agreement, countries will review their collective progress every 5 years, a process called global stocktake that will start next year. You can subscribe to 5 Minute News on YouTube with your preferred podcast app. Ask your smart speaker or enable 5 Minute News as your Amazon Alexa flash briefing skill. Subscribe, rate and review online at 5minute.news. 5 Minute News is an Evergreen Podcast covering politics, inequality, health and climate, delivering independent, unbiased and essential world news daily.